What is up, everybody? I am Adrian M. Gibson, co-host of SFF Addicts, and I'm here with my two wonderful co-hosts, MJ Kuhn. Hello, MJ.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. And Greta Kelly. How are you, Greta?
Good. I'm excited for this. This episode's a good one, guys.
It's a good one. And we're very excited for y'all to be able to experience this. This is a very special episode of SFF Addicts that we were able to record live in person at Seattle Worldcon 2025, which happened just last month. And yeah, I mean, it was wild and amazing and so much fun. But we're really excited to share it with all of you. We had the pleasure of talking about the shifting landscape of epic fantasy with George R.R. Martin, Brandon Sanderson, Robin Hobb, Rebecca Roanhorse, and Ryan Cahill. And
just those guys.
Just those guys.
No big deal.
Just a bunch of beautiful nobodies.
Award winners or bestsellers or anything.
Exactly. But it was so much fun for us to be able to do that on stage, and we're just incredibly happy to be able to share it with all of you, whether you're watching this on SFF Addicts or Brandon Sanderson's channel. We hope you enjoy. Sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for 2 hours of epic fantasy talk. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we hope you enjoy it, and here we go.
Come on, Adrian. We're waiting for you.
Can we get a round of applause for Adrian? Cue smoke and lights.
Well, hello, Worldcon. That was quite an intro, wasn't it? We had a little mini rave, courtesy of John Scalzi, and we are ready to talk epic fantasy now. I'm very, very excited that you're all here for our first live episode of SFF Addicts podcast, which we've had the pleasure of collaborating on with Dragonsteel Books. And these are my co-hosts. I'll let MJ introduce herself first, and then I'll go last. Ladies first.
Ladies first. I love it. Hi, I'm MJ Kuhn. I am author of Among Thieves and co-host of SFF Addicts.
And Greta?
Hi, I'm Greta Kelly. I'm the author of the Warrior Witch duology as well as the Queen of Days. And just as a note before I forget to tell you all of our books are available downstairs at the Book Nook.
Just shill right at the beginning.
Just shill right at the beginning. Get it over with. Rip the Band-Aid off.
And I'm Adrian M. Gibson. I am the author of Mushroom Blues and the creator and co-host of SFF Addicts podcast. And with us, we have a fantastic panel, amazing group of authors. We don't really need to introduce them, but we will anyways, to discuss the shifting landscape of epic fantasy. And so we'll just go from the left side all the way to the right side, starting with Brandon Sanderson.
Hey, I'm Brandon Sanderson.
I want that same clap.
And now, the sexiest man in Ireland.
Have you seen Colin Farrell?
Oh, second sexiest man in Ireland.
Have you seen most of them? Yeah, my name's Ryan Cahill, but if you call me Cahill, that's absolutely fine. I know sometimes it's not that simple. I thought it was an easy surname. Apparently it's not. I'm the author of The Bound and the Broken, and yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Roanhorse. I am the author of the Between Earth and Sky series, which is up for Hugo Best Series. Watch out, Brandon.
There's a reason I'm sitting in between them.
Hello, I'm Robin Hobb. I also write as Megan Lindholm. I'm best known for the Farseer trilogy.
Hi, I'm George R.R. Martin, and let's see, I've written
some stuff.
A Song of Ice and Fire. I know it's 14 years late. Please, don't. I'm working on it, and but I took this weekend off to be here. So
thank you.
I've written a lot of other stuff too, by the way. So people tend to forget about that, which annoys me. But
the pear-shaped man.
The pear-shaped man, yes. Yeah, that's not autobiographical too much.
So, you look at me right in the eyes, George. I'm very grateful for all 5 of you being here. I'm so happy to be doing this with my 2 best friends. The fact that we could be here in person for the first time together. I've been with each of them separately on different occasions, but this is the first time SFF Addicts is in one room together, and we get to do it in front of all of you, and I'm so grateful for every single person that's in this room. Thank you all so much for being here, first of all. Well, we're going to be talking about epic fantasy, which is a genre that I think clearly speaks to a lot of people and is very important to a lot of people. You know, epic fantasy is something that, for me personally, has been in my heart since I was a kid, and the stories that I grew up with, and the stories that I continue to read. And now that I get to be in the writing community and be both a reader and a writer, to make friends with incredible epic fantasy authors and know that this genre is still alive and beautiful and thriving in 2025. So I'm gonna toss this to all of our panelists. I'll give it to you first, Ryan. Stop looking like I want to ask you questions, dude. When you started reading epic fantasy, what did the genre look like? What were some of the genre conventions that dominated the landscape at that time?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I was looking at it recently, and like Wheel of Time was absolutely massive for me. And like my friends and my really close friends and family read Wheel of Time all the time. And it was interesting because, considering who's on the panel, that when you were switching up, that, you know, I was 17 when Brandon first wrote his first iteration of Wheel of Time, and watching that change was massive. But also Redwall was huge at the time for me as well. And like I grew up, you know, with my dad refused to read kid stories to us, so he just read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and I didn't understand what he was saying, but he had a good time. It obviously bled through. But yeah, like I don't know. Epic fantasy was just really structured prose, beautiful, flowy, maybe a bit less, I suppose, not character focused, but a lot more archetypal characters at that time. And I looking through like with Aragorn and Gandalf and stuff like that. And there's been quite a big shift now in the way things are written. And there's a few specific authors I feel are responsible for that kind of shift. But yeah, was there a second part of the question?
No, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. This is such a nice panel.
Robin, we'll toss it over to you in terms of what was epic fantasy like when you first encountered it?
My first encounter was there wasn't much of it that I could find. I mean, after The Lord of the Rings, I went digging and came up with Peter S. Beagle, The Last Unicorn. But there was really kind of, for me anyway, living in Alaska, there was a dearth after The Lord of the Rings. After I found The Last Unicorn, I'm looking around. And so I just plunged back into the earlier stuff, Tarzan, and all of the really good Golden Age stuff that I just couldn't find any really epic fantasy, so I just plunged into what I could find and read.
And now here you are. It's a long journey and it's beautiful to see. George, what about you?
Well, what did the genre look like when I started? Now, I'm a lot older than all these other people. There was no genre when I started. There was fantasy, certainly. Fantasy goes back way, way back. Gilgamesh and the Greek myths and the Roman myths, all of those things were there. And in later generations, there were occasional fantasy stories, plays. Shakespeare wrote fantasy with, elves and Midsummer's Night's Dream and Three Witches in the Woods and stuff like that. But what we think of as epic fantasy did not exist. There was a generally recognized genre called sword and sorcery, which was largely dominated by the ghost of Robert E. Howard. And that was some of the first stuff I read. I was reading a lot of science fiction then. I was like in junior high, and I read some anthologies, and there was one edited by L. Sprague de Camp called Swords and Sorcery that I bought. And that in there was the first Conan story I ever read, and the first story by Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser by Fritz Leiber that I read, and the first Gyrell of Jewry. But those were all definitely sword and sorcery. And then along came Tolkien, and he Lord of the Ring and The Hobbit were gigantic, and not at first. I mean, they sold well, but he was not the best-selling guy of all time. I'd been reading Robert E. Howard and fanzines, and they were talking about this Tolkien guy out of England. He was supposed to be pretty good. So I picked up a pirated edition. His first American editions were pirated. They found a flaw in his copyright material. Ace Books did, and they published his paperback editions without any payment to him or any contract. But that's the one I bought. I would, off the hands, and I read it, and I remember kind of being puzzled at first because I'd been reading a lot of Conan and the giant snakes and the scantily clad women and Conan and his mighty thews. And I couldn't find, Lord of the Rings begins with a treatise on pipeweed, and then there's a birthday party. And there's no birthday party, there's no scantily clad women, which I missed in junior high. But you read it and it gets, you encounter the black writers, and if you start reading Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, cold, you get into it like 100 pages and you think Farmer Maggot is the big villain. And it's all about stealing mushrooms. But no, it wasn't. It gets beyond that. And by the time the black writers show up and you get to Bree and then you get to Rivendell, you're reading something different. And it had its hooks in me, and it continued to have its hooks for me. And then it ends, and where's the next book? Where's the fucking next book? Doesn't he realize that he has to do another book? Fortunately, he did eventually, and it was even better. But the impression that it had on me, it's hard to really summarize it. I mean, I'd been a voracious reader. I'd read a lot of, the books you read for school, and then I'd read a lot of science fiction and some of the fantasists that were around. But this one, it grabbed hold of me, and it would not let go. I think about the period I was reading it, and I was, as I said, in junior high. I don't remember half the teachers I had in junior high. I don't remember what I was doing. I was reading that book. That's my memory of it. It was like I lived it. And the influence it had on me was gigantic. But Tolkien himself was, what happened around that time, Tolkien in America, was considered by American publishing to be a freak of nature, a one-time phenomenon. Here's this weird book about little guys with hair on their feet and the ring. And nobody is ever going to do the same thing. Nobody is ever going to work in that genre. And there have always been in American publishing books or writers like that they come out, they have a giant success, and then nobody can duplicate it. I mean, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, mega hit. Where are the other Seagull books? No, nobody wrote them, or if they did, they didn't get them published. But it was after some time that an editor at Ballantine Books, Lester Del Rey, old-time science fiction writer, fan, editor, decided maybe Tolkien could launch a genre, and he published a couple books. I think Terry Brooks was one of them, very Tolkien imitative, and then also the Thomas Covenant books by Stephen R. Donaldson, which Steve lived in New Mexico when I first moved there. He wrote those 3 books and sent them out, and nobody would touch them. Nobody would touch them. He got more than 40 rejections to finished books. And then he just started over again and sending them out. And finally, Del Rey bought it and published it. A book about an imaginary land that the whole thing might be a dream. The hero is a leper who rapes someone in the early chapters. Who the hell is going to read this book? How can this book be a success? But It was. It was a huge success, and then there was a second Thomas Covenant, and then suddenly everybody was looking at Ballantine books and saying, hey, let's do something like that. And that's where the genre really got its route. And it's still going strong, and people are still, publishing these books, including myself, eventually.
But that's beautiful. It just takes one editor to buy in, and now you have a whole crowd full of people.
Yeah. From scantily clad women to hairy feet. It all worked out for the better.
Scantily clad feet.
Scantily
Hairy
clad
women?
feet. There we go.
That's where we are.
Rebecca, what about you, my dear?
So I am the outlier. I have actually never read Tolkien, so don't hate me, but feel free to hate me.
Everyone has their own path, don't boo.
You're the hipster on the panel.
Oh, yes. But I did read Dune, and I think, arguably Dune is epic fantasy, although maybe it's science fantasy, space fantasy. And I think that was really my seminal work. That really opened me up. I think I was very much like George when I was in junior high. I don't remember what I was doing, but I think 8th grade, I read Dune and my mind just went, wow, look what you can do. Especially the Fremen, although I'm House Atreides all the way. And then I think also things like the Dragonlance Chronicles, which is a little, maybe early YA if you think about it too hard. But I was there for Raceland. I was there for the characters. I love him with my whole heart. And then I really moved into urban fantasy. So I just want to shout that out a little bit because I feel like urban fantasy was a new genre in the 90s that took some of the elements that were missing from epic fantasy, like female-centered stories, like romance, like touches of horror, and brought them into fantasy. And I've certainly taken those elements and brought them into my epic fantasy as well.
Yeah, and I love your stories, and honestly, as someone who writes at urban fantasy, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Brandon?
Yeah, I liked hearing the kind of history lesson from George because
George,
that's
thank you for
actually
that, by the
something
way.
I think about a lot is the history of fantasy. And when I started reading, I was right in that the era he talked about. I'm in the mid-'80s when I start picking up fantasy. And so it's all of the books that I kind of look at as I'm the third generation from Tolkien, right? There's Tolkien's writing, and then there's all the people who are responding to Tolkien. Right, and so that's you've got your YA side with, you can say, Sword of Shannara. We didn't have YA back then, but you can kind of say it's like, hey, let's do something like Tolkien, but we'll target it a little younger. And then you've got like your Thomas Covenant, which is one of the early ones I read also, which is very kind of, let's deconstruct Tolkien, and let's look at it from a very kind of literary critical eye, and things like that. Actually, the first fantasies I picked up were none of those. I picked up, my first three were Dragonsbane by Barbara Hamley, and then Melanie Ron's Dragon Prince, and then Anne McCaffrey, Dragon Riders of Pern. And this is because I found Dragonsbane and the next two in the card catalog by title. I'm just like, you could they were these old things, kids. They were these like cabinets. They were chiseled out of stone. And you could go flip through the cards because we didn't have computers and just look by title. And so I'm just like, well, I love this book. What else is near it in the card catalog? And
What else says dragon?
Yeah, what else says dragon? And those are the next ones in my school thing. But I really got into fantasy at the time, and what it looked like was this kind of we were right at the age of Tad Williams and Robert Jordan, kind of releasing these very Tolkien adjacent epics. And I read a ton of that. And then when I became a writer, when I decided I want to do this is when actually Robin's series really broke out and George's series really broke out, which are kind of I would say the response against Tolkien. Yes. Oh, come on, Robin. A first-person story about an assassin and things like this. Like it's like, what else can fantasy do? Not a response against Tolkien saying Tolkien was bad, but let's get out of Tolkien's shadow, right? Like I feel like the late 90s, and that's when I was starting to write, is the let's get out of Tolkien's shadow. Let's write new and different sort of things. And that's when I was breaking in.
Yeah.
You can
Rob,
throw
do you
the
have a
water.
response to this?
Yeah.
These allegations that
listening.
Brandon is laying upon you.
I meant it as a compliment. I think that stepping out of Tolkien's shadow at that point was a really important thing for the genre, because the people in the 80s did wonderful things, really interesting things, but I felt like we needed to grow as a genre.
Well, I mean, before she was Robin, she was Megan Lindholm and wrote a number of books that were not Tolkien-esque epic fantasy, that were, would you call them urban fantasy or what?
I would say they were more like swords and sorcery. And
But they were good books.
My first attempt at urban fantasy was Wizard of the Pigeon, set here in Seattle. So,
Well, and I have read that. It's a very good book.
Yeah.
So was it the market that caused you to put Megan on a shelf and become Robin, or was it an editor's note, or was it?
a very clever agent,
Very clever agent. Oh, their best kind. Yeah.
Ralph.
Amazing. Well, this kind of transitions really naturally into a question that we were going to ask a little later on. It's actually a question from one of our patrons on Patreon, David Hopkins, regarding a Dairy Project quote about J.R.R. Tolkien being kind of a mountain appearing in the landscape, right, of epic fantasy. What are your thoughts on the monolith of Tolkien as we're kind of discussing this a little bit? Do those words still ring true? Rebecca, I'll
Well,
toss
I
you
can be
first.
brief because, as I said, I did not read Tolkien, but I did read George, and that A Song of Ice and Fire was, of course, seminal, I think, for me in the way that maybe Tolkien was for other people. And so I've always felt that my work is in conversation with George's work. I don't think it's in any way like trying to step out of the shadow. But I think, George, actually reading your work, I felt gave me permission to write morally gray characters, to write complicated things that not necessarily relied on magic, but you could bring in, politics and social issues and all the sort of exciting things that I saw, that you were doing, and of course Dune is doing too. And so, yeah, that's my Tolkien answer. Who's Tolkien?
I love that.
We're going
It's a bold
to
answer.
change the name of this panel.
Just
to
stick the
Who's
knife in
Tolkien?
deeper and deeper.
Well, Ryan, go for it, buddy.
Yeah, no, I think in writing today as well, I think it's extremely hard to escape comparison at all times. And whether it's a shadow that someone's trying to escape from or not, I think it's become a reference point. And I do feel like we're talking about the shifting landscape of epic fantasy, and I do feel like those reference points, there's new ones appearing. So A Song of Ice and Fire is a reference point now for a lot of people. Like, there's a lot of people trying to, the same way you had people trying to emulate specific aspects of Tolkien's work, people trying to emulate specific aspects of A Song of Ice and Fire, or with Robert Jordan's work, and with Anne McCaffrey. Like, Dragon Riders of Pern was my first major introduction into dragons. And so many people think because, I'm a young, or I was young, because I'm a guy that has to have been Paolini when I was younger. It was Anne McCaffrey, it was Naomi Novik, and like, those reference points are changing, but there's always Tolkien in the background. At least I'm seeing it in a lot of modern work, and even whether it's because you're emulating it in some small way or you're trying so hard not to emulate it, it just seems to be there. I don't think the shadow is there anymore. I think that's the difference. I think at the minute, it's just that reference point. It's the painting that people keep looking back at when they look at your painting.
Yeah, it's like the mountain is still in view, but you're not in its shadow anymore.
The mountain's still in view, but the sun got higher.
Yeah. Erebor is still standing. Robin, what do you think about this?
Well, for me, the thing about The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, too, was that here was a world that had a history, it had languages, it had traditions, and it took itself very seriously. These were not disposable characters. I'd read a lot of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser and Conan and Tarzan, and all of the bit part characters came and went. And these were books that had a whole world and a foundation, and that's what I wanted to find again. And that was really hard to find.
Trying to find another real world. There's something tangible about it, something that's like our world. There's so much depth to it, and it's not the iceberg. It's actual depth, which is really rare.
Mm-hmm. Brandon?
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about because on one hand, we shouldn't discount the fact that from the beginning, even when Tolkien was becoming the monolith he was, people were writing things that were very not like Tolkien. I mean, Moorcock has been here all along. right? Writing great. It's sword and sorcery inspired, but it's epic in scope. And you've got, so many great writers through the 70s and 80s and 90s who were not, writing the Tolkien-esque, but what was selling big numbers was the Tolkien-esque, and that's the shadow I think that we have escaped, and that's good. So when I was in college, I was very kind of anti-Tolkien. In this like young kid chip on his shoulder sort of way. I love Tolkien, but I was anti this. Like I had gotten bored with these books, and I hadn't been able to stretch to find the books that were a step further. And I was like, why are we so much trapped in Tolkien? I wrote for my school magazine essays of we need to modernize fantasy. And then about 10 years after that, I'm like, why would I even think that? Just let people read what they want to read. And if people like orcs and elves and dwarves, let them read that. And so what I'm glad with is that the genre as a whole, meaning specifically what the editors are buying and what people are reading, is there's so much more variety. And we do have to, I really think, credit in part George for that. Like a lot of readers, I picked up, Game of Thrones, and I read the first one, and I'm like, oh, I know who the hero is, right? It's this kid, Bran. I've read this book before. And then he gets thrown out a window, and I'm like,
Oh, spoilers.
You threw me for a loop, but I think I know, George, I know who the hero is now. It's Eddard. It's actually, and that was my exact... my exact line of thought. And so, that era of fantasy, I think, was good for just shaking us all out of, the buying public. And there were writers writing all sorts of things, but the buying public. And that's when I feel like we really saw things. And the other big disruptive moment was the YA followed by urban fantasy shakeups. And if you know anything about the history of epic fantasy, I'll stop after this, but the late 90s, early 2000s were really hard for epic fantasy. We had George and Robin come out and sell really well, and then the editors learned the wrong lesson. Okay, just a little quick one. So Robert Jordan missed a deadline, and they slotted a Terry Goodkind book into that slot. They already had all the money and funding for the publicity of it, and they just spent that on Goodkind instead and made him a giant bestseller. The publishers all thought, we can take anything and make it an epic fantasy bestseller. And then there were 4 or 5 enormous flops. And in the meantime, people were jumping over and reading Interview with the Vampire, and they were reading Harry Potter. And really, Steven Erikson is the only person during that era that really broke out. And even it was really hard because only the Brits were willing to buy and read.
Don't point at me when you say Brits.
It was over that way. It was toward the Brits, beyond you.
You are the token Brit on this panel.
In the periphery.
They have to go past you. And so, they were the only ones that, Erikson, I believe Steven Erikson is Canadian, but he sold the UK. Yeah. So, real big dearth for a while, and I think the shakeup was really good though in the end. But it took till 2005 for me and Rothfuss and Nora Jameson to sell before epic fantasy, I think, really kind of recovered.
I said earlier in the history about the key role played by Lester Del Rey of Ballantine Books, publishing particularly Stephen Donaldson's books and all that. But there's the flip side of Lester as the influential editor, which is he was an important writer and editor of the pulp era in science fiction and fantasy, and he had very strong views on how to do it. And when he started publishing these people, he tried to impose those views on them and to make the books very formulaic. And some of the writers followed basically the Del Rey formula, but not all of them. I mean, even Steve Donaldson, when he did the second Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, Lester gave him notes and Steve refused to do them. And Lester insisted that he do them, and it grew into a huge fight, which ultimately ended with Steve Donaldson saying, well, I'm pulling my books then. And of course, they were huge bestsellers, so the people at Ballantine said, "Oh, no, you're not. No, you're not. Hey, Lester, you're not editing him anymore. Go away. Stop giving him notes." And he did. Lester continued as editor, but he was no longer the editor of Stephen R. Donaldson, and Steve was able to do things that Lester did not want him to do. So that opened things up a little. We weren't all following in the Tolkien footsteps as interpreted by Lester Del Rey, and that was a period of kind of chaos and stuff like that. I will say that although I get credit, but killing people and all of that stuff, I was sort of imitating Tolkien there too. I remember reading Lord of the Rings, and it was great. And then Gandalf died. You can't kill Gandalf. What the fuck? Conan never died. Conan would fight 50 people, and then he would be nailed to a cross, and he would bite the heads off buzzards, and you never knew. You picked up a Conan book, and I don't care how many people he was fighting. He would win. You knew he was safe, and also there would be scantily clad women and giant snakes. So, when I wrote mine, I wanted to surprise the reader and take them to places as I was surprised by Gandalf's death. Now, yes, I know Gandalf came back. It was kind of different, but he did come back, which actually I would have kept him dead, but. That's an issue for me and JRR to discuss down the line. I still love Tolkien, and there's no doubt that his influence was great. But as a reader, I like books that are not familiar to me. I like to be surprised. I like twists and turns. I like the character who has depth and is not what he appears to be. And that's what I look for in a lot of books. I don't care what the genre is, science fiction, fantasy, Westerns, whatever the hell it is, surprise me. Take me to places I haven't been before.
That's actually a perfect segue to our next question, because we've also seen a very welcome shift in epic fantasy that is not just focused on Indo-European inspired settings to books that explore cultures and places from all over the world. So we'd love to hear from each of you how you approach your world building in your stories, but maybe Rebecca, could you kick us off on this one?
I'm sorry, Ryan was talking to me and I was not paying attention.
What like if Ryan fucking Cahill? If you do that again, you're off this stage.
I have not given a timeout all week,
please?
but I will.
Just repeat the end of that.
Yeah. We wanted to talk about how you approach world building in your novels.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so my series, Between Earth and Sky, is inspired by the pre-Columbian Americas. So think like the Aztecs, the Maya, even the ancestral Puebloans of New Mexico, where I'm from. And I think for me, that was really a childhood dream. I grew up, reading all these things, all these epic fantasies that were inspired by European cultures. And that's fine, it's great, I love them. But my dream was, what if we could write an epic fantasy, with that sort of depth and informed by history, but set it in the Americas? Because we have these rich traditions and culture and history here. We had, societies that read the stars and built, massive cities, and we're so sophisticated, but it seems to all be lost sort of in history. It's not the history that we teach in our classrooms. And so I wanted to write it in a fantasy setting. That was really my dream. And so that's what inspired Between Earth and Sky. And if you read it, hopefully you realize it is fantasy, because there's like magic and crows and things like that. But then maybe you're a little bit inspired to go find out the history too of these actual peoples and what they accomplished, and their trade routes and their sophisticated sailing methods and things like that. So I really tried to bring a lot of that in. Yeah. And I just want to shout out, because I do have the mic, some authors that are doing the same sort of work, not particularly in the pre-Columbian Americas, but in Asian cultures and in African cultures, because those books are out there. Like, I'm all for letting people read what they want to read, but sometimes I don't know if people know what they want to read because they haven't seen it yet. And the truth is that, like, BIPOC authors of color, queer authors, we just don't get a lot of the same marketing and publicity as other authors do. And that's just the way it sort of works. But it really is going to come down to fans and who's reading the books. And the more people that read them, the more we get to write them. So I just want to shout out The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, if you haven't read that. She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan, one of my favorites. Yay! The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri, which is also up for Best Hugo Series, and Rage of Dragons by Even Winter.
Can I also shout out Fonda Lee's The Greenbone Saga, which is the best urban epic fantasy that I've ever read. Yeah. Brandon, what are your thoughts on this and your approaches to world building?
I mean, it is what's unfortunate, and George talked about the Del Rey era, is that it feels like we kind of dig deep. What we want to do is what Tolkien did deeply, not on the surface. And I do think there is a danger of mistaking, like Robin talked about this idea of, this depth of culture, this depth of world building, this depth of society and all of these things, mistaking the fact that certain tropes exist for the deep work that Tolkien did. And we have this danger, and this happened during this era where, Lester Del Rey was famous for, I believe, you could tell me if I'm wrong, George, for saying, has to be a male protagonist. Because Lord of the Rings had a male protagonist, this has to have a male protagonist. And saying, in some of these things, which is not, that's incidental to what made Tolkien successful.
That was one of the issues between Steve Donaldson and Lester Del Rey. Second Chronicles of Thomas Covenant is not the protagonist.
Yeah.
He's a side character. The protagonist is a woman. What was her name? I don't remember, but and Lester did not like that.
And so because of that, certain models that were both conflating the skillful things Tolkien did and the tropes that he used, the danger is saying, well, we have to keep to the tropes rather than the deeper digging. And so I think this has been wonderful for fantasy. One of my big arguments has been, and I think that lull in the late 90s happened because people come, like George said, they come to books for something unfamiliar. They want the familiar and the strange. It's that mix of, I want something that made me feel like what I love, but I don't want to read the same thing. And I think that's because in fantasy, the sense of exploration and learning something new and going a new place, that sense of wonder is so important to us. And if all the books go the same places, what's going to happen is you're going to lose that sense of wonder and you're going to feel like you outgrew fantasy when fantasy could be so much more. And so for the whole genre, if we want to keep bringing in new readers and keeping them here, we actually need a lot more to explore than the same stories. Fantasy almost lost me because I was bored with fantasy, right? And so anyway, just it's an enormous positive. I think people don't quite understand how important that is to our genre, that sense of wonder and exploration. And so, bouncing between a Sanderson book and a Fonda Lee book so that you are getting this sense of exploration of different places, I think is good for everyone. So if you're getting a little bored of the fantasy, you probably will still love fantasy, just stretch a little further, is what I would say.
Mix it up a little bit. Yeah. Robin?
I'm sitting here thinking about, where we're kind of moving with epic fantasy, with grimdark, particularly with writers like Mark Lawrence and Joe Abercrombie. And you were just talking about unusual settings, and I'm thinking about The Wonderful Library, the book that wouldn't burn. And that's an incredible setting, unlike anything I've ever seen before. And so now, in the back of my mind, I'm asking all these questions. Is this a European-inspired setting because we have books on shelves? Is this? It's as you say, it's fantasy. You can follow it in any direction you want to go, and it's if you've got an idea for a book or a story, you don't have to feel limited by what's been done before.
Can I add something here real quick?
Go for it.
Another really important aspect of this that we're seeing lately that I really like is I feel like a lot of, and again, nothing against these writers, fantastic books during the 80s and 90s, but it wasn't just European, it was like generic European. It was like this idealized sort of thing. We see now, if you will take something like Uprooted by Naomi Novik, right? And where she says, I'm going to go specifically to my Polish roots and be inspired by not just generic kind of England-esque, but instead, something more like I mean, I know these aren't fantasy, but the Saxon Tales or things like this, where it's like, no, I'm gonna look into the actual history and actual, instead of blending it all into one, build something like Uprooted, which is fantastic, and I like seeing that a lot too. So even the kind of European fantasies, there is opportunity to go deeper than whatever you would call generic fantasy land.
Yeah, vanilla fantasy, and within all of these different countries and cultures, and basically all have beautiful folklore and incredible heritage, and the fact that someone in Eastern Europe can write a European story, but with a very deeply rooted traditional history and reflection upon that country's language and cuisine and all these different aspects that make it feel really unique, even though it technically is European fantasy. Yeah.
And this is what Tolkien did, right? On the deeper level.
Yeah, exactly. Ryan?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like one of the big shifts that I saw was a shift between a lot of the older stories that I read having an almost Omniscient style narrative, and when we moved to the more, not modern, but the third limited style, everything becomes a little bit more intense, it becomes a little bit more real, and it adds texture to the world. And there's two pieces of advice that I listened to when I started writing, and one was by Mary Robinette Kowal, and one was by my proofreader, became a copy editor, Taya, who's T.L. Greylock. And Taya's advice was, I was writing, okay, and you're trying very hard to make sure that the world has texture to it and has new things in it. And she's like, hey, look, you have men and women here doing everything. They're in the army, they're doing this. There's one thing I've noticed in a lot of the books that I read, is that's the case until something generic happens. Everyone who dies in the army is a man. And she's like, challenge your default. And that sentence kind of stuck with me. Like, through everything that I was writing, I was always defaulting to everything that I knew and everything that I am. And that kind of started to add a lot of texture to my world when I was doing it, because I realized, that's what I was falling back on every time. And there was that, and I was listening to an episode of Writing Excuses, and Mary Robinette explained about how you don't have to have that sense of, or suspension of disbelief when you have a Pegasus if you show how to saddle the Pegasus. All right? You don't have to teach them why the Pegasus could fly. You don't have to show anyone how a Pegasus flies. Show them how you saddle the Pegasus, and all of a sudden you have a grounding point. And those things stuck with me when I started writing, and I tried to world build. I realized with the third limited and with trying to add texture to the world, that it wasn't just about the depth of the world building. It was, but it was about exploring the depth of the world building through the textures of the character, what they feel, what they see, what they smell. I don't just want to show all these different foods they eat. I want to taste them. I don't just want to see all these creatures. I want to feel them. I want to know what it's like to be next to one. I want to know what it's like when they breathe. What does it sound like? If you're putting your ear to the neck of a horse, this isn't a horse. This is like a scaled wyvern-style creature. How does it feel? Are the scales warm? Does it have a rumble? And I don't know. That sort of stuff, to me, I'm starting to see a lot more of. And it gets back to that root of escaping to a world that feels real. The depth of the world, when you can get the senses in and you put your reader in that position, they can feel the world. And I think for me, once you feel the world, you're in the world. Once you're in the world, you're lost. And there's been a lot more of that recently that I've seen. That's
almost the magic of specificity.
That's how I approach it, and it's what I love reading.
George, any follow-up advice about world building that you always gear towards?
Well, I think world building was one of the things where Tolkien had the most influence. I mean, I'd read fantasies before, as I mentioned, and some of them had efforts at world building, but they were cursory. I mean, even Kuhn and Robert E. Howard, the Hyborian Age. Take a look at the Hyborian Age, and it's sort of okay, but it doesn't really hold up to 5 minutes thought. There was a fanzine. You guys remember what fanzines were? There was a fanzine devoted specifically to fantasy called Amra, and it particularly was focused on the Robert E. Howard stories. And I remember reading an article in one which was something about the sea trade in the Hyborian Age, and the guy went through every country in the map of the Hyborian Age, Cimmeria and Numidia and Shemp, and no, that's Three Stooges, one of them. And the country that Conan becomes king of, that was Aquilonia, right? They had ports and ships and all that, and they traded. But if you look at the rest of the countries on Howard's map, there's pirates in one place, and there's corsairs in another place, and there's cannibals on a set of islands. And who was Aquilonia trading with? You know, what else in the world was a buccaneer or a corsair or something like that? It was not really economically soundly based.
Yeah, who was making the food?
And Conan would, he defeated various kings and dukes and things like that, but there was no history. I mean, then I'm reading Tolkien, and it's, I love this book. I don't want it to end. Well, fortunately, I have another 100 pages. And then I turn the thing, no, it's 100 pages of appendices. And the story is actually over. And now I have to look at the entire history of all of the kings of Numenor and what dates they ruled that, and what were their policies, and how many children and wives did they have. And it was kind of fascinating, but and now I can't think of how much power that had on me lingering. It made the Tolkien's world and Numenor real in a way that Aquilonia and Cimmeria never were, because Howard only did a cursory job of his world building. And even Howard was better. I mean, Lord Dunsany, who Tolkien himself admired. I liked Lord Dunsany's books too, but you read them and all and say, once upon a time there was a princess, and her father was the king, and then some elves came along, and they, where were they from? They were from Elfland. Oh, what a good name for it. That was a very different type of story. That was a classic fairy tale in the tradition of, Cinderella and Snow White and so forth. After Tolkien, I don't think you could get away with that stuff anymore. You damn well better do at least a Howard level world building. And the other thing for me was I also loved, in addition to Tolkien and fantasy, I read other books, including historical fiction. And I loved historical fiction. And I wanted to take some of the wonder of fantasy, but blend it with the realism and the grittiness of historical fiction. And I think that really set the trend for at least the better fantasy people who followed. And also, to tell the truth, I just like it. So I do it in my own books here. And I know not everybody likes it. It's, you write what you love and what you want to read, and you hope that other people also want to read that. I'm aware of the criticism of my own books. Why does he spend so much time talking about heraldry? Well, I like heraldry. And I like food. So yes, I will tell you what they're eating for dinner.
So I'm going to write about it.
And it's not all going to be, I'm stopping at an inn and they'll have stew. Which, before Tolkien, every fantasy book I did. Did Conan ever eat anything but stew? I don't know. But great world building, I think, really makes a book or a story come alive, and I love it. And if you don't want to read about food and heraldry, maybe my books are not for you.
Go find something else. Yeah. Go ahead, Robin.
I'd like to put something out there, and I've heard too many people who come to me and say, I want to be a writer and I want to write fantasy because you can write anything in fantasy. And I go, no. I do a tremendous amount of research. You have to lower the threshold of disbelief. And that means that everything you write that is parallel to this world has to make sense to people who have experience with it. If he's riding his horse across the desert for 5 days straight and the horse doesn't collapse and die, half your readers are going to throw that book across the room. If you have your family of 3 harvesting the wheat field in 1 day, yeah, you're going to make 1 loaf of bread, maybe. You need to really look at it and say, how did people do these things? You need to look at geography and say, if you've got an ocean here and a mountain range, you've got a desert beyond it. You've got because the mountains stop the rain. You can't, you need to really think about it. Rivers have to flow downhill, and that's really obvious. But there's a lot of things about geography and currents. And you really need, if you want to write a believable fantasy where people can move into your world and walk around, you need to do your research, and you need to, what kind of food are they eating and where did they get it from? Oh, you've got this massive army? Where are your farmers who are growing the food to feed this massive army, and your population that's giving birth to all of these soldiers and raising them up and training them? You know, put your roots down. And I get thrown out of so many fantasies when I'm reading it and I'm going along and suddenly I go like, oh, you know, you can't grow that kind of a tree in that kind of a swamp. I'm sorry. And now I'm setting another book down and it makes me sad.
You don't grow your peach trees in the swamp? No?
You don't put oak trees in a swamp.
Or you can invent a magic sort of oak.
You can have willows. You can have lots of willows.
So
you
Ryan,
can even
whenever
have
you want to write
whomping
about trees, you
willows.
just
on
have
top of it.
That's why people criticize my palm
Jumping
trees in
in
the
the
swamp.
ocean in basically China and swimming back to Middle Earth.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh yeah, that was a little much here. So yeah, and a lot of the research you can do is book research, because it doesn't necessarily, we're 21st century Americans and Brits and other folks, and we live in a modern world, so you're going to write about something like the Middle Ages or the ancient times, you better do book research. But what I also found is that some of these questions you can't answer with book research. You have to talk to people. I mean, in my books, when Bran gets thrown off the tower and he's paralyzed from the waist down, I'm not paralyzed from the waist down. I didn't know anyone who was, but fortunately, I had fans who were, and I wrote them and I asked questions. And we had a little correspondent with a guy who was actually paraplegic, and that was enabled me to do Bran the way I did him. And I've gotten some nice letters from fans who are disabled in one way or another who like the way that I do it. And if you think you know it, it can bite you in the ass here. I know my books have the island called the Arbor, where they make really fine wine. And that was very well established. And then I started getting letters from people who know a lot about wine and saying, no, what you said about the Arbor, it could not possibly make the best wine. No, it's an island, and instead the winds are in the wrong direction. And what is the soil? Oh, fuck, I should have researched wine better, I guess. But it's too late to do that now. And the one that was the most challenging to me was Sansa has she's a young 11, 12-year-old girl, and she has her first period. And I have 2 sisters, but we never really discussed that issue. So I found myself talking to women. Excuse me, but when did you have your first period, and what was it like? And
market research.
You don't know me, but I have a question
and by the
for
way,
you.
on that particular question, I got 37 different answers. So it's a very, very enlightening, and I kind of could choose whatever I wanted. But yeah.
I'm going to touch on something George just said, and then I'm going to be quiet for a while. But my greatest resource, George says a lot of stuff you can look it up in books, but I have a Rolodex on my desk still. And in that Rolodex is, here's the person, if I have a question about a horse, can I take a saddle off a cavalry horse and put it on a draft horse? What happens? I don't know, but this person can say, well, you're going to have all kinds of problems. Or Stephen Burst and I were writing a book, and we were going to have somebody get shot, contemporary, and we wanted it to do a lot more damage. 2 in the morning, he calls up this person he knows who works in the emergency room and says, this is what we want to do. And the person gets really excited and says, oh, you know what? He gets shot in the arm, but the bullet travels up the bone. It goes into the body cavity. It's bouncing everywhere. And we would never have thought of that. It was brilliant. That's why you need, if you're going to write fantasy, collect your people. And maybe you don't have a Rolodex, but you got a phone. Go after not just the book learning, but go after the people that know the weird stuff. It's wonderful.
The weird stuff is what makes stories good. It's like just accrue these people around you and be like, I'm going to pick your brain at some point to write a weird story. Yeah.
It's better than someone seeing your search history and being like, how long does it take a body to decompose based on the temperature and relative humidity?
What the fuck is wrong with you?
In a desert. How long?
I think we all have that.
All right, well, we're going to get into, Robin, you were speaking earlier about different kinds of systems, and I think beyond just the systems that we experience in the real world, geography and different things like that, there are also systems that we can create, and this is going to be one that tickles Brandon's fancy, which is magic systems, and the ways in which magic systems can really enhance a world. It can bring so much to an epic fantasy story, but there are also a ton of authors who love to write hard magic systems, and there are authors who like to write something in the middle or more toward the soft side of things. So Brendan, I'm going to toss it to you as our resident magician.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, this is I want to point out, when I give this lecture, you can go watch my lecture on YouTube. I won't give it here. The idea is not that you should write magic in any one way. The idea is that understanding magic as a tool for storytelling and the different emotions that different types of uses of magic can produce. In my books, I come from a science background, right? I was a chemistry major in college. I tend to be, I come to it from a love of some great science fiction novels mixed with some fantasy epic storytelling, and I actually live in this Dune area as well. I read Dune years before I read Tolkien, and I appreciate both of them, but I would also put myself in the more inspired by Dune category. I look at these things, and I have a lot of fun with characters who are trying to navigate making these things work as if they're a branch of science. But there is a cost to that. The cost to doing magic the way that I love to do it means that you do lose some of the sense of wonder that's innate to magic, in the sense of fear. There's a fear to the story like the monkey's paw. There's a fear to using some of these softer magics that you get the sense that a human doesn't know what they're doing. And when they use the magic, terrible things can happen. Tolkien was actually really good at this, right? He has a hard magic system. You slip on the ring, you know exactly what happens. The characters can use it to solve problems. You've got a soft magic system. Whatever Gandalf does is going to be cool. You're not sure if it's even magic or if something else happened, and it's going to have dire consequences that the rest of the characters can't even comprehend. And these two magic systems are used for brilliant purpose in the books. And so I love seeing how people use magic. People assume I read exclusively rule-based hard magic systems, but I don't. I read widely around them all, and I appreciate them all. They're all like, fine wines where there's so many different vintages and so many different things to taste. And so don't make the mistake of assuming there is one way. I do worry that a lot of writers who are inspired by me assume you have to do it my way, which is interesting because when I broke in, I sat on a lot of panels at Worldcons and people told me I was crazy because this was the urban fantasy boom. And in urban fantasy, you often don't want the characters to have absolute control over what they're doing because you want to maintain some of that horror and mystery to the use of magic. It should be something that mostly belongs to the Fae or the monsters or whatever that you can weaponize, but dangerously so. Not all, obviously, there's no rules to this, but when I broke in, people were saying, no, you shouldn't do it this way. If you have rules, it ruins the magic system. I would just encourage people, if you're a writer, try all different applications until you find what works for you. And what works for you may be different for every book.
Yeah, completely agree.
The readers react to this differently too, and there are definitely schools of this. I've been on many panels at conventions about people who have devised elaborate magic systems, and they're very proud of this, and the readers are excited by this wonderful, innovative magic system that they've created. But no, I don't have a magic system that I have created. I don't think you should. I don't find it helps. If you look at Tolkien, and there's epic fantasy, there's high magic and low magic. Tolkien is actually quite low magic. I mean, Gandalf may be a wizard, but what does he do that's wizardly? I mean, they're in Moria, and here come 100,000 orcs, and they're going to get killed and eaten. What does Gandalf do? He pulls out Glamdring, his sword, and he stands shoulder to shoulder with Boromir and Aragorn and these hobbits, and they try to fight their way through the orcs. He doesn't just wiggle his fingers or raise his staff and make the orcs melt or anything. Gandalf is wise. He knows things. But it's not big magic, really. Even Sauron, he's the ultimate dark, evil kind of guy, and he's a big eye. And what does he do? He can't even in the battle, he gets his arm cut off, and the ring is lost by just a guy with a sword. A guy with a sword, not a magic sword, but just a sword. But it all works. It's powerful. And I think magic, if you look at the real world, I have to say, I don't know, some of you may be wizards or pagans or witches or something, and you actually believe in magic. I bet people like that, but I don't. And I don't think magic really works. These magic systems are fake science, it's J.D. Rowling magic, where you can go to Hogwarts and you can take a course in spellcasting or mixing potions or how to properly summon a demon. No, that stuff is dangerous and uncertain, and you can look at it and who knows, will it work for you or not, or will the cost of it be worth, or will it be a total bullshit? I don't know. I like that. So, no, but the people who like elaborate magic systems, the fans who like it, the readers who like it, they're welcome to do it, but it's not for me.
I mean, everyone has their preference when it comes to the stories, but also when it comes to magic systems. So someone might really like Brandon's magic systems. Someone might like, more urban fantasy style magic system or soft magic system in epic fantasy. Now it's your turn, Rebecca. Go for it.
I was just trying to think like what my magic systems are like. And I think my magic systems are very organic to the individual because sort of the cultures that I'm familiar with and I work with, there is often not a line between what is reality and what is magic. The whole world is magic. We're living with it around us all the time. So when I come to a story, I want the magic to feel organic to who those characters are. So in my first series of novels, which is urban fantasy, it is not epic fantasy, it is set in a near future Navajo nation. And the magic that a post-apocalyptic Navajo culture would have is going to be very different, I think, than what a Tolkien might have, even though I haven't read Tolkien, or someone else. So it had to be based in their lived experiences and their knowledge of the world and how the world works. And the same with my epic fantasy. I was like, oh, what am I doing there? The main character has the ability, who goes through trauma. I think a lot of my magic is also rooted in trauma and how trauma sort of awakens our ability to change the world around us for better or worse. And so now he can call, animals to do his bidding, crows specifically. But it's a very symbiotic relationship. It's not a one or the other. And then I have a character, that interacts with like the ocean in the same sort of way. Also awakened by trauma. I'm seeing themes in my work that I hadn't seen before. I have issues. Maybe I need therapy and not a book. Yeah. But anyway, so I think that's, for me, I haven't really thought of it as like systems. There's definitely no science behind it. Oh, science is not my thing. That's why I'm a writer. And I think, it's all sort of about organic and our interaction with the world, and that there's a very thin line, if a line at all, between humans and nature and magic and what that all looks like.
Ryan, get in here, buddy.
Yeah, I actually really love what Rebecca said there, because that's craft. That's using magic as a conveyance tool to show trauma, to dig deeper into the characters. You're using one thing to do two things, which is it's craft, it's everything. But what I love, we talk about magic systems, right? I think sometimes people just hear the word system and they go, magic shouldn't have a system, so you can't have it. But I love the exploration of something that's understood and something that's not understood. And when I'm writing my own books, I like to have both, because a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So as soon as someone believes they understand something, it opens up a whole realm of world building. You look at the Wheel of Time, you look at the Breaking. People who thought they knew more than they did. People who thought they had a larger grasp of magic, and then you're going back to a soft magic system where they actually don't understand what they're doing, which is, it is science. It's people not understanding. People who create, like you look at the atom bomb, you look at people creating something for one purpose, not understanding how it can be used for a different purpose. And so, like, when I really find magic systems or any magic that I love the unknown is incredible. When you see panels that are solely based on Tolkien or someone else, it's always about the things we don't know. What is Tom Bombadil? Okay?
We'll never know who Tom Bombadil is.
That happens all the time, because we don't get the answer. And that's why magic is wonderful, because you don't get the answer. But it's also amazing to play with the craft element of, well, I do know. I have a system. I know how it works. And then it fails, because you didn't know as much as you thought you did, because magic is magic. But having the two of them is a really cool dichotomy to play with when you're writing.
Yeah, that contrast and that interplay is really, really cool. Go for it, Brandon.
I would say, just piggybacking on what Ryan said, and this is the most relevant thing. I talk about this with my students. I say, it's really fascinating, because we're all in this panel because of world building, right? That's what sets off fantasy from other genres. But we're, in some ways, not in this room because of world building. If it were all about world building, you'd be able to read an encyclopedia, or a gaming manual or something on a world, and you'd like that just as much, and you don't. Magic is only as interesting as what it does to the characters, whichever system you're using. And it's only as interesting as the themes that it advances and the ways that it makes the narrative work. Magic in world building is the least important part. If you're going to put, plot, setting, and character, I would say the setting is the least important. Because a book with fantastic characters and a weak setting is still generally a fantastic book. We'll complain about it. We'll have panels about it and be like, look how broken the magic or the technology is for this given thing. But we'll still bond to those characters. And so I use magic systems kind of like the gateway to get in, but you don't stay for a magic system. You stay because of character. And, if you're going to be a great writer, character, I think, needs to come first, whichever genre you're writing it in, however you're approaching it.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Just as you were saying that, it came to a thought as well about with George's writing and the Song of Ice and Fire with magic, and you're saying about how the characters interact with magic and how they're affected by the magic. And that's kind of the thing that got me when I was reading that, is the complete helplessness they have to magic. You see Stannis as one of the greatest military leaders in history. He can't do anything. And he doesn't know why, and nobody knows why. And you even see the Red Woman, and at the same time, she doesn't even seem to really know why. And that exploration of the different styles of magic and showing how it can affect people, the lack of understanding, you're at the behest of anything.
That's mostly from historical fiction, and I love the fact that the prophecies are always accurate, but always wrong. They always misinterpret them, and then it bites you in the ass. You thought you were this was going to happen. Look at, Macbeth, and when Birnam Wood comes to Dunsany. Yeah, well, it sort of does, but it doesn't help him any. And I do love that. I think I got turned to discuss magic, and very few fantasy writers do this, but it gets you into religion, Does your fantasy world have gods and archangels and other kind of things that are going around? And what sort of powers do they actually have? I think I got corrupted on some of these issues when I was a small kid. I was like 7 years old, I believe, and I was a pretty smart kid. And I came to my parents one day and said, I don't think there is a Santa Claus. It doesn't make sense. We don't have a fireplace. How does he get to our house? And how does he get to every child in the world in one night? And reindeers don't fly. I know this stuff. And they said, "Oh yeah, you're a very smart kid, George. And yeah, don't tell your sisters; they're young. They wanna believe in Santa. Don't spoil it for them." So I didn't. Okay, but there was no Santa Claus, and I knew that kind of early on. But then I made a mistake. A year later, having been praised for that, I applied the same standards, and I said, "There's no Jesus either, is there?" He did this walking on water and raising people from the dead. If he could raise Lazarus from the dead, why didn't he raise everybody from the dead? And they were not happy with that revelation.
The existential
so you got to be
questions we get
careful here
into
in these fantasy worlds, whether Jesus or Santa ever shows up.
They just have to teach you how to saddle the reindeer.
Yeah.
Once they teach you how to saddle the reindeer, now you know it can fly.
Once you know how the saddle works, it all makes sense. All right, Robin, go for it. Microphone.
Microphone, yes. This is magic because I don't know how it works, but it works. So any sufficiently advanced technology/science is indistinguishable from magic. Any sufficiently reliable magic is indistinguishable from science. I take a match out of a box and I can make fire anytime. But that's because I know there's the chemicals and the friction, and it works. You better know your magic, really, really. I'm assuming that a lot of you actually are interested in becoming writers when I'm talking to you like this. You better know your magic. You better know what it can do. You better know what it can't do. And please, please, for the sake of every reader in the world, don't tell me the magic can't do that. Magic's incapable of that. Oh, we're really in a tough situation. If we try really hard, the magic will do it. Oh, please, don't do that.
Internal consistency.
But you know, I don't like Apple magic. I like the kind of magic I have.
George, we'll have a
And
masterclass
Google
after
is
the panel.
evil magic. Google magic, that's really bad stuff.
That's not sufficiently reliable magic.
Well, the AI magic is going to get all of us. And it's right around the corner, and it's going to get you. It will. It's bad stuff.
Yeah, that's the dark magic. So we talked a little bit earlier about kind of the progression of fantasy over the 90s and those early 2000s, and I do think the past couple of decades in particular have been a really exciting time for nerds in general. We've got the Lord of the Rings film trilogy, we've got TV adaptations of things like Game of Thrones and The Wheel of Time, right? Things like that have kind of brought epic fantasy more into the mainstream. So, in your view, what are these kind of shifting standards of adaptations? Do you think that this is affecting expectations for the epic fantasy genre as it's written? So I saw you reach for your mic. Let's start with you.
Yes. Yeah, so
I have thoughts.
I had the joy of taking Black Sun out in Hollywood recently, like pitching with AMC and Angela King from The Walking Dead. And
I'm sorry.
Say it again?
I'm sorry.
Exactly. Yeah, it's brutal out there. I will tell you the question I got the most is this a romantasy? What is the relationship like? What do the TikTok fans say about your main characters? And so I think the biggest shift that I'm seeing is that you are finding epic fantasy being mixed with romance, which does not have very strict world building like guidelines or research, at least in my experience. And then things like murder mysteries, like I think Robert Jackson Bennett's The Tainted Cup. Is it up for Hugo? I loved it. I thought it was brilliant.
Fantastic book.
And that is epic fantasy, but it is a murder mystery, sort of a Holmesian sort of murder mystery as well. And there are other folks sort of mixing genres. So I think the trend that I see is actually moving away from epic fantasy. Maybe other people have like different like takes on that. But the feedback that I seem to be getting is no, it's not, that's not what we want to see. We have short attention spans out there. Epic fantasy is too big, it's too long. Your characters are too complicated. I don't understand. Wait, who do they love? Like, you're like, oh, okay, well, I can put a love triangle. I do love a love triangle, but that's not why I'm writing epic fantasy, so.
Well, Brandon, you clearly have thoughts when you apologize, when you said I'm sorry.
I think, number one, it's been pretty good for fantasy. I think, again, Game of Thrones was a big game changer for this. It's both it's good and it's bad, right? For years, everyone chased having another Game of Thrones, and I do think that was destructive to some properties they bought. Because for a while it was like you either have to be Harry Potter or Game of Thrones, and I don't think Hollywood did a very good job with either of the things they tried to shove into those boxes. But I do think, there's been some really good things. Arcane is great. Some of the animated things that we're seeing, and it looks like they're willing to try in Hollywood with adaptations, and so that is good. Because I know it's partially an adaptation question. On the trends that we've seen in our era, it's been interesting because there was, like, when I broke in in 2005. For about 10 years, it seemed like the kind of things like I was writing was what people naturally were buying from new writers, because you saw a bunch of us. Brent Weeks, me, Rothfuss, though of course he has both magic systems. N.K. Jemisin I've mentioned. Again, she tends to do both hard and soft and all around, but the things that broke her out were more of a hard magic system, I believe. But regardless, after that, there was this wave of let's try diverse voices in fantasy, which was kind of another great movement. And now we're in the romantasy era. Now we're in the, yes, but what if they kissed era, which actually has me smacking my forehead a little bit because I feel like there's two trends I've missed presaging. One was when the dystopian thing happened. I'm like, oh, of course, if you take the most dangerous game and make it teenagers, the teens are going to be like, yeah, my life is dystopian. They're all going to buy it. Like, when Hunger Games hit, I'm like, I should have seen that. I did presage. We do also, let's not discount the cozy fantasy, the post-COVID cozy fantasy, the things that are happening. And I like that one too. But romantasy is also kind of obvious now that it's happening, that dragons plus kissing would have been really popular. But
yes, kissing.
Yeah. What do I think about the trends? You know what? The thing about it is good stories are evergreen. And that's always been the case. Good stories are evergreen. In the mid-90s, it shifted toward more grimdark. But the Wheel of Time kept selling, right? And I wouldn't call Robin Hobb grimdark. I mean, you do treat Fitz pretty poorly, but it's grimdark for Fitz and no one else.
He does it to himself.
Yes, that's true. It's all his fault. But, there were still openings for other things, but that opening up lets Joe Abercrombie and some of these come out and sell. I think good stories are evergreen. And I remember sitting, I'll end with this, on a World Fantasy Convention in the in the audience, because I hadn't sold anything. This was like 2002 or 2003. And there was a big editor who I shall not name on the panel, and I was listening for what they're telling us what's going to sell, what we're supposed to write. And they said, do not send me vampire books. Vampire books are the things that nobody wants. We are not buying vampire books. Stop it. Pun intended, vampire books are dead. Twilight was a year later. Nobody knows. Write your stories. Good stories are evergreen.
Yeah, I agree. George?
Yeah, I said this earlier, write what you want to read, write the things you love. If you're lucky, other people will also love them and you'll find an audience. That's not guaranteed. When I talk to classes of young writers, I say, it's not a profession. If you temperamentally want security and a nice career that you can have and advance and get promoted and eventually they give you a gold watch. And no, it's I've crashed and burned at least twice in my career, and then I didn't crash and burn on this one, but there's still time. You don't know, and you're right. Yeah, you hear these things, and I've heard a lot of them over the years here, and many of them are profoundly stupid. Don't put a yellow cover on your book, I've heard. No book with a yellow cover has ever done well. What? And they come up with stuff like that. Yeah, I wanted knights on the cover of Game of Thrones. Oh no, you can't have knights. Nobody likes knights. That would not sell at all with knights. Okay, I like knights, but and it turned out there were other people who did too. Write the stuff that you love. Write the story that you want to read, and that hopefully other people will also want to read it. That's kind of the best I have. And you're still going to get, if everybody in this audience went home and wrote a novel, maybe 10 of you would sell it, and 4 of you would have a hit. But it's tough. It's competitive. It's Stephen Donaldson, more than 40 rejections for the Covenant books, and he wrote those books. He wrote the entire trilogy before he started sending it out. Which is also, by the way, something that I did on most of my books, because I started out writing short stories. I wrote short stories and published short stories from 1971 to 1977, 6 years before my first novel was written. And I did not sell, as a lot of people were doing it today, I did not sell chapters and an outline. Why? Because I was afraid they might buy the chapters and outline, but then my muse, who is crazy, would decide to write something else halfway through, or I'd missed a deadline, or it wouldn't happen. I did not want to do that. My agents didn't even know I was writing my first novel, and it was finished. And then I sent the whole manuscript to them. Look, I wrote a novel. Hey, can you sell it? And turned out they could. That may not be for everybody. You may be better, if you like doing outlines and you like to work that way, maybe that's the best for it. But you got to find your own path, and it's a challenging field. But to my mind, that makes it easier. And you get to go to conventions like this and talk with fellow writers, and all of that. And it can be a very rewarding profession. Maybe in some cases financially, that's been true for me, but not for everybody. But I've gone through periods where the financing was not working. I thought I was going to lose my house and have to take a job selling real estate, but fortunately I didn't. Follow your own muse and do the best damn story you can.
Well, I really like what you said about there being stories in this genre for everybody, and I think that's really true. But historically, epic fantasy has been a little bit more white male dominated, which makes it hard for marginalized voices and women to find their spot. And then on top of that, you have all the publishing challenges that come from being a debut in general. So I would love to hear, Robin, if you want to touch on this. When you first started in the industry, was it hard for you to break in? And how have you seen the industry change since you started?
I was really focused on learning how to break in. I subscribed to Writer's Digest. I looked at Writer's Market. I studied a lot of stuff. And I started out writing children's stories for the very small circulation, and I sold to like Jack and Jill and Humpty Dumpty, digest magazines that don't even exist anymore for kids. But the way that I broke in was, it broke all the rules, which was I was attempting to write short stories of a fantastic nature. I submitted a short story to a little fanzine called Fantasy and Terror, published by Jessica Amanda Salmonson here in Seattle. And instead she chose it for an anthology she was putting out called Amazons, with an exclamation point. Amazons went on to win a World Fantasy Award, okay? So now I have a story in an award-winning anthology. And the editor of that anthology, Terry Windling, said to Jessica, I liked this story by Megan Lindholm. Is she writing anything else? And at that point, Jessica said, are you working on anything? And I lied through my teeth. And I said, yes, I'm working on a novel. And Terry asked to see it, which was terrible, but I had 2 short stories, and I hammered them together into a novel, and I sent it to Terry, and it was Harpy's Flight, and that was the first Megan Lindholm. So I guess the moral of the story is, you don't know how you're going to break in. Just keep writing and getting it out there. And I so admire the people who are independently published, the people who believe in themselves enough to put their novel out there. And if you walk through the dealer's room, you'll see those very brave people out there saying, this is my book, and you should read it, and you might like it. You know, there's, are there any rules anymore?
Yeah, I don't think so. Ryan, I'd love to hear your perspective from the indie side and breaking in.
Breaking in?
How much time do we have?
Still waiting.
No, it's just, someone was talking to me a while ago. We did a panel on PR for authors yesterday, and someone came up to me at the end, and they were just asking different things that I did or other bits, and I kind of had to say to them, hey, look, you could do everything I did, piece for piece, toe by toe, everything. Still mightn't work. And like what Robin said there, it's the most cliched advice ever, is just sit down and write. Okay, but you can't do anything if you don't have a story. Or you can lie and say you have one on the way. But if you want to be an author, the key thing is to have something written. And even at the minute now, I have my 7-month-old baby's at home, and we've had her now, and I was on deadline while she was born, and that was crazy getting that finished. And I've had a few months off writing now, and I hate it. I want to write, and like I didn't know I'd feel that way. I love having everything there, and I love having and her there, but I hate not writing, because I took some bit off to get some headspace and to come out here, and I'm just going, even now, some people will go, oh, if you've made it or you haven't made it, whatever made it means, whatever success means. It's like, I feel like as soon as I stop and say, okay, I'm good, is when I'm not good. Like, I need to go back and I need to keep writing and I want to get more done. And so, like, I feel like as soon as you feel like you've broken in, unless you're there for a long time, you're probably in the wrong place. Like, I just keep writing, sit down and get it done. And it's like with the TV adaptations, like, the danger that I keep seeing is we have a massive runaway success. It's the same thing that happened with publishing for eternity. You have a massive runaway success and you want to mirror it, you want a new one. But anything in visual medium is much larger scope. It's way across the world. There's a much bigger reach, much bigger intensity, and it happens much faster. And so something goes up, Game of Thrones comes up, and they go, okay, all we want is the next one of these. And so every writer starts going, okay, I got to write the next one of these, instead of writing the story that they wanted to write. And like, that seems to be the message, is write the stories that you want to write, because there's no guarantee. And it's the person who finds the gap in the market that's going to make the win. But if you're chasing the trend, you're always getting leftovers. Like, the gap in the market is the thing you want. You don't want to chase the person who ran through it. That's all.
I had an editor when I was trying to break in. And I'm like, it was a Del Rey editor, and I'm like, what do I, he said, pitch me your story. And I pitched him a story. He said, you know what? Go read Game of Thrones and give me that. I'm like, he actually said that. Steve Saffel, I don't know if you know him. And I'm like, you have Game of Thrones. It's really good, but I can't write you Game of Thrones. So yeah, I I wrote my books, and eventually I found a place for them.
Yeah.
Everyone's always going to tell you, I want this, I want this, I want this. But like you were saying, vampires are dead. Next year it comes out. You don't know. But if you don't write the story, if you don't write the thing you want to write, you're going to get either bored of it, you're going to get frustrated with it, you're going to burn out, you're not going to finish it, or you're not going to want to give it to anyone. Or even if you do, you won't have the enthusiasm to keep going when they want the second book. Like, you got to look after yourself, because there's no guarantees, there's no silver bullet to do anything. Everyone takes a different path. The only consistent thing that I've seen is the people who keep doing it for a very, very long time seem to love what they're doing. Mm-hmm. If you don't love what you're doing in an industry like this, you're going to be in trouble.
And I'll just
100%.
add one note, just as you said, it takes a lot of time to get a book published. I would say probably from the time you sell it to the time it hits the shelves, for traditional publication and for people who are not, they might fast track a brand, well, you do your own stuff now, but they would fast track your book or something, but it would take 18 months. Usually from the time you sell it to the time it makes the shelf. So if you're chasing a trend, by the time your book hits the shelves, the trend is over. So you really do have to find the story that only you can tell or that feels personal to you. And that's what you have to put on the page. Because the story that you tell is also going to speak to other people. The better you tell your story, sort of the more you can connect with others and they will come to your story. You will find your readers. So I wouldn't worry about that, about trends.
When I was talking about that panel we did on PR, one of the things that came through more than anything else is the only thing you can control, the only thing that's consistent is being authentic. That is it, being open, honest, and authentic. And it's the same when you're writing. Readers can feel it. When you read a book, you know when the author loved what they were doing. I know George loves heraldry. I know. But for me, it doesn't matter. I might not love heraldry going into the book, but if the author loves heraldry and they're really passionate about it, I'm reading it going, I fucking love heraldry now. This is great. But that's what the reading experience should be. And you can't give that to a reader if you're not in love with what you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. And Ryan, I kind of want to get your takes, and Brendan too, since there are these forms of publishing. I mean, it's vital that authors are writing the stories that they want to write. And the readers that will want to read them will find that story. But at the same time, there are different avenues through which we can put these stories out into the world. And Robin brought up indie publishing. Ryan, you and I are in this world as well. There are also things like crowdfunding and Kickstarter. And I think these are changing the landscape of epic fantasy, not necessarily the genre itself, but how that genre is delivered to
Changes
readers.
the barrier to entry as well.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about self-publishing and how it relates to epic fantasy and
I don't want to take over the panel with it, but it's interesting. Like when I came in 2021, like it's only been like 4 years, but it feels like it's been 10. But when I came in, it was one of those. I didn't query, because I had like this real cliche thing on my head. Is like there's two reasons I will allow myself to fail, but I will not allow myself to fail for two reasons. One is because I didn't work hard enough, or two because someone else made me fail. And I'm not putting my fate in someone else's hands. And that was just it. And I was just writing the book and I was having a great time. But even if I had a query, people weren't buying the type of stories I was writing at the time. That classic epic fantasy, right then, we were on a wave where people wanted new things. And it was like, oh, that's dead. Epic fantasy's dead is what I kept hearing from everybody. And then I was like, okay, all right, cool. But this, I don't know how to write romantasy. So I just wrote this story instead.
People want the kisses.
They want
the kisses.
I'm not good with triangles, right? Geometry wasn't my thing. But I just,
Can they
I don't
kiss
know.
on a saddle, on a Pegasus saddle? Can that happen?
You were getting to a different realm of romantasy. But I think there was something there. I described this as like, it kind of felt like Justin Bieber walking in when pop music was niche. Okay? Because you come in and I'm like, okay, all right, here's my epic fantasy, because that's what I love writing. And then all of a sudden, over the space of months, readers just kind of appeared everywhere. You're like, what's happening? And you're like, well, there's not a lot of new stuff in that area coming right now, strangely, because publishers weren't buying it. And that's part of how that indie method can change the landscape. And like you move forward now, and I have a worldwide print deal with my publisher now, but I still have my ebooks and my authors with someone else. And you can see how the world is shifting in publishing, and the ability to be hybrid allows you huge amounts of flexibility. It also allows you financial diversity, which is important for maintaining a career. And it's what I've had to look at. I was like, hey, do I want this to be a career? Yeah, I do. Well, I need to feed myself. So I need to make sure that I look after myself that way and see how to do it. But it allows that barrier to entry changes. You know, publishers want this time. That doesn't mean that all the other stuff's gone. It just means you have to wedge it in somewhere else and hope it spreads.
You don't have to just feed yourself. You got to feed your baby girl now too. So
I didn't hear you.
You have to feed your baby girl.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
You got to do that. But it's a big thing. Like, especially I think with indie, one of the big differences is, like anything, you don't have someone like an employer or a publisher giving you a paycheck. You know, a paycheck you earn, but you don't have that. So there's a lot less reliability. So I had a much more, I needed to focus, and Brandon does it extremely well, like business acumen level of trying to build a foundation and a business and a company and understanding that you are a business and you are a brand. And, you know, I watched a lot of like your lectures and stuff before as well about what to do when you come in. I was like, I'm treating this like a job. And I think I was talking to Adam before, and we were just saying, I came in and I was like, I need to find a way, I need to treat this like a business. I said, how do you write? It's like I realized my entire career has existed from a year after Rhythm of War to Wind of Truth. And in that time I've published 1.5 million words. And I was like, that's a lot of words. Well, you know, if I worked in insurance or in law or in something else, I can't go to work and not feel it that day and go home. So I had to sit down. If I'm writing 2,000 words that day, they're written. If I'm sleeping at 2 a.m., they're written. And I don't know, it just, if you want something hard enough, you chase it.
Definitely. And Brandon, how does crowdfunding and Kickstarter fit into your business approach, and how you can deliver epic fantasy stories to people in different methods than just traditional publishing and those kinds of gatekeeping?
Yeah, excellent question. So I will say that there's still a place for traditional publishing. I hope there will always be a place for traditional publishing. I think it is a valuable service. I like the editors. I like the whole community. It's funny because in New York, agents have a certain reputation that is pretty good. In Hollywood, agents have a different reputation. And I mean, the bookish community of publishers, writers, authors, well, the same thing, but editors, publicists, everybody. It's just a thing that I think it's a good group of people. And I do think that some people are not served by indie publishing. So let's put that out there. I do think in general, if you have the business acumen in you, and you're willing to try it, being hybrid is the way to go in this market. This is just because, why did I do the crowdfunding? Why did I do Kickstarter? Well, in 2000, I think it was 11, you'll have to fact check me on this, Macmillan, which is the owner of Tor, had contract disputes with Amazon. Basically, it was over ebook pricing. It's a big whole thing we won't go into, but the end result was Amazon turned off the ability to buy all Macmillan books on Amazon. So for a month, my books could not be purchased on Amazon, and Amazon was already at that point a significant enough player that could have sunk a publisher. Now they're even more powerful. When that happened, I realized something. I realized even though I love all these people in traditional publishing, they work for Amazon right now. They work for Amazon and to a lesser extent Barnes & Noble. I had friends that they would sell a book to traditional publishing. Everyone would love it. They'd take it to Barnes & Noble, and Barnes & Noble would say, doesn't fit our list, and they wouldn't pick it up. And that killed the book. So indie publishing really started in 2010 with that Christmas season when the Kindle really got big. And 2011, my books got turned off, or 2012, somewhere around there. I said, I want to have a direct line to my fans. And I want to be in a position that no company can destroy my career. The only person who can destroy my career is me writing bad books, right? And that's where I started to build all this. And it took us a little while. Our first book that we released was 2015. And that wasn't crowdfunded. And then we moved into crowdfunding like 2017 or 19 after doing a few on our own. And then we did the big one that was so huge. And I was able to leverage this. It's it's unfair to try to compare anything to me because I had a very successful traditionally published career. I had made an effort for over a decade to build my own fan base and have them have a direct communication with me, and then I turned that into directly selling them books. I don't know if that's a model that can be followed by anyone else, but I will say, be aware that, you know, the reason I like crowdfunding is because you aren't beholden to Amazon or the publishers or anyone. If you're doing Kindle, you're still beholden to Amazon.
Yeah.
It's like what you did isn't replicable, but it does what indie publishing did. It opens a window, it creates options, and everyone isn't just beholden to being signed now. It's not just about going on, so it's showing people what's possible. It might not be at the same scale, but it's options. You know, now indie is a viable option, like a genuine viable career option. Like, I'm here. like in general, like obviously I'm sitting here going, I'm honored and privileged to be sitting up here with people whose books I was reading when I was younger, and it's amazing. And I was able to just go and say, I want to do that, and was able to do it, and nobody was able to tell me no. Like, and that's viable. And the fact
It's not just viable.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
it is like, you know, it's a significant portion of the market to the point that, you know, it's not like, yeah, it's a big deal, indie publishing, and that's great.
it gives trad authors options. Options are never bad. Options are the best thing you can ever have, whether you want to take it or not. Like, an option that you never plan on taking is still extremely useful in the negotiation if you never tell anyone you're not planning on taking it. Like, that's business.
And the beautiful thing is that stories that could die on submission in the trad space, authors can now take that and find different avenues of making that story a reality, and therefore giving new readers the opportunity to delve into a world that they otherwise never could have done, you know? And that gives more opportunity for authors who don't have a trad career and want to start an indie. That gives opportunities for trad authors who are having difficulty in traditional publishing and able to go hybrid and self-publish at the same time. It's giving new opportunities for voices who wouldn't have been heard before. Marginalized people, women, BIPOC authors, anyone really who wants to tell an incredible epic fantasy story. Now they have the opportunity to do so through different mediums, through different publishing avenues. And it's really beautiful to see different authors, young in their career and older in their career, able to express their love for epic fantasy and tell these stories and share these stories with all of us, that we as readers and we as writers can embrace epic fantasy together and, you know, continue to push its success and its brilliance into the future. And I just want to close out by asking all of you, Robin, what would you like to say, my dear?
Well, I was going to ask permission to ask a question or two of the audience. How many of you have purchased and read an indie published book this year? There you go. Okay,
That is at
how
least
many?
that's more than half the audience.
How many of you have participated in a GoFundMe for an indie published book this year? Okay, not quite as many, but it's still a sizable amount. How many of you are getting a little bit tired of gigantic trilogies? Anybody? Oh, gigantic trilogies.
No, you need at least 7 books.
Yeah. For a trilogy, yeah. I was just really interested in knowing, you know, because we talk about indie publishing, we hear it's successful, but there you go.
The crowd has spoken.
But I think just...
Maybe I'm the last person to to talk about this because, yeah, I go back way, and I don't know where the future is going to take us. I mean, we're seeing so many things, you know, streaming publishing, indie publishing, AI. Hollywood is changing. Everybody's buying everybody else, and companies are merging, and they're all of that. And if you asked me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, to future publishing, I would probably have an answer that I'd been giving for years and how to break in. But I don't know if my answers are any good anymore because things keep changing. Yes, there are people who have had great success with indie publishing. but don't think that's necessarily going to be you. There's a convention I go to every year where there's a guy who's been indie publishing for like, I don't know, 10 years. He has his own book out. And we go into the dealer's room, and there he sits. He's got a table, and he's got his book stacked high. And I don't know if he's ever sold a copy. I know when you go in the dealer's room, people don't want to make eye contact with him because he's going to try to sell you his book. And there are a lot more of those people, I think, than other people. And there are some indie published books that are great books, but a lot of them are not great books, and that's why they're not selling to traditional publishers. They're flawed books, they're weak books, there's a lot and that's true of traditional publishing too. I mean, editors, don't think an editor sits there and just reads one great book after another. They love to find one great book after they read 40 books that are not so great and are very derivative. In some cases, are actually plagiarisms. So it's tough. And if you are indie publishing, how do you distribute? Who's going to carry your books? What bookstore is going to carry it? What distributor is going to distribute it across the country? I own a bookstore. If you have too much money and would like to get rid of some of it, open a bookstore. And we have, of course, we have my books, but it's science fiction, fantasy. We have a lot of books by local authors, a lot of books by old authors, and new young authors that we happen to meet who's traveling through New Mexico. We do that, but it's still hard to sell books. And careers being, your career is pretty secure, I would think, unless you say something that people find objectionable. And then you could be canceled. I've known several people who've been canceled recently. You have to, with these conventions, I've been going to Assembly 1, you used to really be able to say anything you wanted to say about any damn subject. Now you better be careful. The internet has changed everything there too. I know young authors, people who've been at Clarion or Clarion West, they've studied, they have a lot of talent, and they're trying to break in, and they read a book and they send it to the public. That's what I did. I wrote a book, I gave it to my agent, he showed it to some publishers, and one of them bought it. Now, even before they read the book, I'm being told this has not happened to me, but it's happened to a bunch of authors. What do the publishers ask when a young author hands in the book? How many followers do you have? Can you send me a link to your website? We never had to worry about that in the old days. Brandon, you're obviously a master of this internet thing. God, the stuff you've done on it is amazing, but not everybody can do that. And sometimes doing what somebody else has done doesn't work. A number of years at my bookstore, we had traveling authors through. We had John Scalzi there, and we talked about, I interviewed him, and we talked about how he launched his career. It was a book called Old Man's War, which he was initially putting up on his website for free. You could just tune in and get the latest chapter. And he had a lot of readers building up, and an editor at Tor noticed this and read it and said, oh, this is good, and then Tor bought that book, and his whole career launched from there. Well, I said to John, but I know a lot of people have websites, and they put their books up for free, and they don't get an author from Tor or editor from Tor reading it and making an offer. In fact, they have like 37 people reading it. What was the difference? How did your book, when you were unknown as a science fiction writer, what did yours go through? And he said, well, I was actually on the internet as a journalist before that and doing a personal blog. And at one point, I wrapped bacon around my cat, and I photographed it, and it went viral. And then a couple years later, when I wrote Old Man's War, it was, that guy with the bacon and the cat has a book out. So I don't think that's a viable thing to imitate. I also I think you got to be careful about doing things that are popular. I remember the horror boom of the late 70s and 80s, when Stephen King was God, everybody was suddenly writing horror. And you went into the bookstore, B. Dalton's or whatever, and the whole front section was paperbacks with black covers, and the letters were dripping blood. And that lasted like a year or two, and then it stopped. And then there was the urban fantasy boom, which some of you have mentioned, and that's sort of dwindled too. I have friends who, they had successful science fiction careers, but then this urban fantasy is big, I'll write an urban fantasy book. But the timing wasn't right. By the time they finished the book, that boom was over too. And I don't know about romantasy. Is romantasy, that's the big thing right now. Is that going to last, or is it the next thing here? I don't necessarily, if you love romance and fantasy and kissing and maybe erotica, I hear there's a lot of sex in some of these books, by all means write an urban fantasy or write a romantasy book. But if that's not your thing, don't change to try to accommodate that trend, because that trend may be over by the time you do it. And I don't know. So my answer here is I don't know what advice to give young writers anymore, except it would be good if you had a trust fund or won a lottery, or had a spouse, a husband or a wife who had a very lucrative job, and you could just sit at home and write your books and so forth.
Get a trust fund or a rich family. Robin, do you want to finish this off?
I just wanted to add really quick that it used to be, as a traditional writer, traditionally published writer, I sent the book in and they copy edited it and they chose the cover and they put it out there and they advertised it, and it was in the trade journals and they pushed it along. And now traditionally published writers are being asked to, do you have a, we're out here now, we're promoting our own books, we're running contests on our websites, we are doing a lot of the heavy lifting that the publishers used to do. And that's, I'm still scrambling to figure out how you do all that. But it's been a real shift over the course of my writing career, from the publisher doing all of that to the writers taking on a lot of that themselves.
And I think that contributed to self-publishing becoming a big thing, because if your traditional publisher is not doing the heavy lifting, you might as well do it yourself and make a lot more money.
The thing is, people like you, they should cultivate people like you, because you have a blog,
Yes.
and you have, how many thousands of readers do you
that's
have?
the amazing thing about podcasts and different YouTube channels and different avenues through which people can learn about this stuff. And that's why Worldcon is amazing, and all of you in the crowd for being here to learn from these fantastic authors. And even if you're not a writer, I think there's still a lot to learn about epic fantasy and this genre that you love, and the fact that regardless of the path that an author chooses,
I think that's
they
something
can deliver a
that
story
is
to you.
still true. I mean,
Yeah.
I went to my first Worldcon in 1973, the Toronto Worldcon, and I've been going to almost every one since. I've missed a few along the way. But Worldcons and smaller regional cons where you go and you meet people, Worldcon is the best because it's largest, and you tend to meet your readers, but you also meet other writers, you meet editors, you meet agents. But again, though, not so much as you used to. Worldcon used to be obligatory. Everybody and the agent was here. Every publisher was represented. Now, not so much. The San Diego Comic-Con has 150,000 people. Worldcon has 6,000. So, and a lot of the publishers, they have a big table, big promotion at San Diego Comic-Con or at New York Comic-Con, where I'll be going in October. But not so much at Worldcon. I still try to go to Worldcon because, I don't know, it's a special convention for me.
It is a very special convention, and this has been a very special panel, and we thank you all so much for coming to join us, and I'm very happy that we could do this. This is the week, basically 4 years ago to the week that I started this podcast, and it's a blessing to be able to celebrate our 4-year anniversary here with all of you, with George, Robin, Rebecca, Ryan, and Brandon, with my besties, Greta and MJ. I love you both very much. And I'm just so grateful to all of you for taking the time to be here with us, to talk about epic fantasy, to learn about this genre that we absolutely adore. And, you know, epic fantasy has come a long way. And I can see a beautiful future for this genre. And so I just want to say thank you to all 5 of you. Thank you, MJ and Greta, for your friendship. Thank you to everyone in this audience. You're all beautiful. Round of applause.